Welcome, brave listeners, to the Next Level podcast, the podcast that will push your business to the next level. And we are here in the 4th episode today, and I'm very happy. We have a special guest today. I know I tell to everyone it's a special guest, but it is a special guest. And of course, I'm not alone. I'm here with my co-host, Katarina. Thanks so much for being here, Kat.
It is absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.
Beautiful. And I'm going to introduce our guest today. So today, our guest is someone who knows what it really takes to build a business across cultures. Raquel Boechat. It's a Brazilian-born entrepreneur, Canadian citizen now, and the CEO of Canada's Starthub, a company that helps over 60 international startups and small business establish themselves in the Canadian market. She mentored more than 3,000 entrepreneurs worldwide and co-founder of AI education initiatives, and she serves on the board of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce. Raquel was also recently shortlisted for the Top 25 Canadian Immigrants Awards 2025.
Congratulations. That's a big deal.
Thank you so much for being here, Raquel.
Thank you. Thank you very much for these kind words, Bruno. And yeah, I'm in the short list, so you still have time to vote
for that.
me.
Oh my God, that's a big accomplishment, right? Not just for like immigrants, but for anyone, like recognition, right? For all the efforts, all the work that we've been doing. I know you a little bit about your story, but Raquel, congratulations. You are just amazing. Thank you so much for accepting the invitations and be here.
Thank you for inviting me.
And today we're going to talk about culture and how understand the culture and how important it is to do business, not just here in Canada, but worldwide, right? And I know I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit and tell to everyone, our listeners, who is Raquel Boechat from your perspective?
Okay. Well, I think you did a very good job. But I can say that my whole professional life, I've been an entrepreneur. Of course, I worked in big organizations, in newspapers. My background is in journalism. And when I started traveling abroad, I saw that my passion was to be curious and know more about people and cultures and be awake to see the differences in a way that we can just learn and share. And in that moment, I said, okay, I want to have my business and be free to do this kind of exploration and go abroad and visit other parts of the world. And here I am in Canada since 2018. And my company guides international entrepreneurs that want to go through the same path and start their business to have a headquarters in Canada to go global. And with that, I had an amazing experience learning more about different cultures. I think maybe Toronto is the most multicultural city globally with more than 200 wow. languages speaking here in the city. So we are always surprised. We in a cafe, in a library, in a workspace, with different cultural nuances, different ways and perspectives to see things, and the curiosity and be open for that and respectful is crucial to have a good professional relationship.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. The first question that now I will start this conversation and ask you, it's how would you define? Let's always start with some definitions and like from your perspective, of course, there's no right or wrong, but what will you define business culture? Because when we say about people, it's easy to understand, that person comes from that country, right? But we are starting to have teams and become a business. It's not just a person anymore. How you could define a business culture or something like that or related to that, and why it's crucial to understand its nuances?
Perfect. Good question, Bruno. I think there are big differences in business culture and cultural nuances in an organization, right? So business culture is the values, the purpose, the vision of the company, what's the priority for them as a business and a business model, and what is really what they value more, right? So this is the business culture. But the cultural nuances in the team and in different realities that they are living with, or thinking about different countries or different regions or different backgrounds, different stories. We are talking about everything that's connected with your story, right? So all of us have a different story.
That's true.
So my perspective about things cannot be the same as yours, even if we are in the same country, even if we are from the same region, even if we are in the same city, right?
That's true.
At the same time, of course, if we are from a high context region or country, or a low context region, you have stronger differences. Right? So the things
Add more flavors, right?
Yeah. So for example, you will read the air when you are asking a question, and someone shows you like a face that doesn't appreciate. You're gonna understand the body language or the tones if you are in a high context culture. But in a low context culture like Canada, for example, or United States, we have to be more direct and say things in a verbal way, because this small communication cues we cannot see, because it's different culture. So imagine in a conversation in a business environment, if you ask a question and someone goes with an indirect answer and doesn't say what you want to hear, you might think, oh, the person is rude. It's like going around and not telling me whatever I want to know. And the opposite can also happen. So you ask a question and you are expecting the person is going to be polite with you, and then comes with a direct answer that's like, oh my God, this guy was so rude. He said like this, but he was very sincere, right? So it's not because it's rude, it's because it's direct. And in a negotiation, it's the same thing, right? So if you don't put the clarity on the table and you explain how things will work and what are the rules, or how we are going to combine our agreements here, what's going to be discussed,
The
and
expectations.
the expectations we have. If you don't put this clear in the beginning, all these cultural nuances are going to be mixing up the agreements and creating a lot of misunderstandings.
Wonderful. And sorry, Kat, do you want to say something? You do also have like lots of experience like across different countries. Probably like you know as well, like different.
Even within Canada. So,
Even
I've
within
lived.
Canada.
Yeah. Even within Canada. So I've lived, as you're pointing out, I've lived in lots of different countries. I've lived in Japan and China, very high context cultures, and very different in the way that they have context. I've lived in Switzerland and Germany, which are also very different. But even within Canada, so I grew up in a cowboy town in British Columbia, and when I moved to Vancouver, totally different culture. When I moved to Calgary, which is a big cowboy city, different than my hometown. Yeah, so even though it's still cowboys, it's a very different way of being, because, they've got oil and gas, it's a bigger city, there's lots of other things going on. And then when I moved to Toronto, again, totally different culture. And when I say to Torontonians and I say it's an American city, they don't like that very much. That's
You hit the nerve.
That's the Western Canadian being, I don't know if that's really being direct, but it's, it's just relative to what I experience in other places, totally different culture. And also within organizations. So we often hear stories about, the salespeople can't talk to the product people because they speak a different language and they don't understand each other. The marketing people can't stand the finance people, totally different language, right? Totally different way of seeing the world. So there's culture in so many different contexts. Yeah, and then our socio-demographic backgrounds, how we grew up, what our families consider to be the way to be, can be completely different if you're speaking to a different family that might be in a different socio-demographic context. So yeah, culture is everywhere, and we really need to pay attention to it all the time.
Wonderful. And you're Brazilian, like me, and we know a little bit about the country that we're born. And the questions I will ask you, like when you start to make business here, because that's a good thing for people that, oh, I am Brazilian, I know how to do things, I'm gonna move to a different country, it's gonna be the same because I'm trust myself, whatever, it works here. What are the key difference between the, let's talk about Brazilians because we're Brazilians, but just to show people there is some difference. So between Brazilians and the Canadian business culture.
That is fun, Bruno, because there are so many differences, and at the same time, a lot of things that we match and work together. Yeah. One thing is that for the Brazilians and Latin Americans in general, I would say, but Brazilians especially that we are talking about, we are building a relationship first. So we want to know the person. We ask personal questions. If the person is from abroad, for example, we invite for dinner in our house before we do business. We talk about life. We ask if they have kids, and we talk about their makeup or the hair, and we say very personal things that in Canada would sound like absolutely disrespectful, because we are being invasive and we are not close yet to do this kind of thing. So would be like it's extremely awkward to invite someone that you don't know to have dinner in your house, and then it really creates a misunderstanding. So this is a big difference. Another difference that is quite funny is the distance. When you are talking to someone in an event, or Brazilians are very close and warm. So we come and when you see, you are super close to the person, and so the body distance is something that we have to be aware, because you can really sound rude and be inconvenient if you are just staring the person in very close and actually you are trying to show that you are paying attention. So this is very interesting topic. The other thing is ice break, the small talk. I learned this, of course, in a most difficult way here, because I would arrive in the events like on time, or in the webinars online. I stayed here since the start of the pandemic, so I would go to the webinar on time. Like, see, if the webinar was 5 p.m., I would be there 5 p.m. or in the meeting, and everyone was already talking about business. There was no small talk at all. And then I just go over that. The small talk starts before the meeting starts.
That's true.
So you have to be in the meeting at least 10 minutes before, then you are on time. So I was always late, although I thought I was on time.
Oh my God, that's very true.
And it's so true. And I completely understand, because if you want to be productive and assertive and you want to start the meeting at 5 p.m., let's say, if you want to be closer to the person and talk a bit and do the small talk and break the ice, you have to be there a bit earlier and respect the time of the meeting. But if you do that, probably in Brazil, the person is not going to be there. No one's going to be in the room. And you will probably not be able to open the webinar if you... Yeah. So it's...
That's true.
And if you go in a birthday party or something like that, you might arrive before the person.
That's so true. I can tell about today. But the thing is, I just had one conversation today with the guy in the line. We are at the Consensus Startup event. It's happening here. And we were discussing about that. He went to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu dojo and say, okay, the classes start at 9, so I arrived at 9 and nobody was there. Not even the teachers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I'm sorry. That's a kind of Brazilian thing. But that's true.
But if you know it, once you understand it, then you can work with it, right?
And I remember like for the first episode that you talk about having some navigators to understand like this difference between the cultures and understand why the Brazilians are like this or the Germans are like this and the Japanese are like this, right? So, and I learned that and I love it. So having these navigators, try to find them, it'll be like a very good tips like to understand why Brazilians are this. And okay, now I'm going to behave like this when I have to deal with the Brazilian, again, without lost my culture, right? Because that's one thing that I will ask you. How can you adapt because you're now in a completely new environment, a completely new country or whatever, or dealing with people with different cultures, but at the same time you have to understand their culture, but at the same time you have to be yourself? Or how far can we go to get into like a midline to having a proper conversation?
Great question, Bruno. I think when we are talking about trust and reputation, we need to be authentic. So we cannot lose the authenticity when we are learning about other culture or being in another country. It's not going to sound okay.
And people will realize, right?
They will see. At the same time, you have to respect the rules, right? So what is okay to do here? The communication etiquette, the norms, the things that are showing that you are a professional. Simple things. For example, if you do a presentation in Canada, a business presentation, you cannot stay like 15 minutes saying what the products you have, showcasing all kind of services you have, and you are an amazing consultant in many solutions. No. The Canadians are expecting you to start saying what the problem you are solving and what are the pains you saw and why you realized that this was a good solution for that and how you are going to solve their problem. So you look to the problem of the other person, not the solution you have. It's a completely different perspective. So when you are blending, like connecting in a different culture, I think this kind of things you have to adapt. Otherwise, you're going to show as a not professional and a person that is not prepared, for the meeting, right? At the same time, if you have a culture that you ask more questions, you are more extroverted, or you invite to your house, you will probably explain, give more clarity in the conversation, and potentially the person that is more direct and in more low context will come also more closer to you. So they also like the warmth that we have, for example, in Brazil. So it starts with learning each other and respecting and understanding how we can deal in a respectful way, keeping our roots, right? But some things I would say, if you're living in that region, the communication etiquette, you have to respect if you are doing business there to make it work.
Beautiful. Do you want to add something good?
2 questions. How do you teach people or encourage people to actually pay attention? And how do you teach people to ask questions? In my experience, in living in other countries and watching people do business, mostly as Westerners in non-Western countries is where it was most obvious to me. This navigator idea is so important. So the story that I told that you're thinking of is when I first moved to Japan. It was the first time as an adult that I lived in a different country. And there were times we would just look around in Japan and just think like, these people are nuts, like they're crazy, right? And then, so I had to go through that emotional process of like, it had different emotions. Sometimes it was funny, sometimes not so funny. And then I would go to somebody who'd been in Japan longer and said, what's the story on this? And they would explain it to me. And I, usually has something to do with history or the way that their society, it's always history of some sort. And once they explained it to me, I'm like, oh, totally makes sense. Like now I can live with it and now I can even enjoy it or at least tolerate it, one of the two, right? So there's this whole idea of developing awareness that I think a lot of people don't do enough. And you'd use the word curiosity. And I really think that we need to make curiosity a love language that everybody speaks.
That's true.
Yeah, because curiosity shows respect. I mean, if you're asking questions to people, legitimate questions, yeah, and genuinely from a curiosity perspective, how do we help people to become more curious, more aware, more open, and less judgmental? And the second part of that question, which is also, how do you also ask for tutoring or mentoring? Right? How do people ask for that? Because there's a lot of times, for example, in Japan, where I went to one of my coworkers or somebody and said, I'm in this situation. I don't know how to deal with it. Like, I know I made a mistake, but I don't understand what the mistake is. How do I apologize and how do I do it better next time? Right? So there's the preemptive and the repair.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Yes. And I agree with you. There is, I think, one basic rule is that we have to ask open-ended questions, right? So this helps to reduce the misunderstandings, because if we go straight to a close-ended question and you just have to answer to me yes or no, I'm actually bringing you to my point of view. My background is in journalism, and we learned that since the basic, right? It's you have to open a conversation, giving space to the other to explain their perspective. So when I'm guiding my clients, especially because most of them are expanding their business to other country, mostly coming to Canada or going to Brazil, they first, before a meeting starts, they have to know some specific things that might happen there. And they are not going to feel uncomfortable or make a mistake because they don't know. So the first thing I say a few things, they do their homework, right? But I would say that if you don't know, ask an open-ended question like, can you explain for me more about this? It's not clear for me. In my culture, we do like this, or in Brazil, we usually have a shorter meeting to discuss the plan, and then we go to the event. I don't know. But we can clarify asking questions, showing curiosity and respect, right? And if you make a mistake, you can always come back. You can always come back and explain what's happening. Like, I think I understood something wrong. There was a misunderstanding here. Maybe it's a cultural nuance that is different. And my intention was that. And then bring again to the table and clarify. And this can happen in negotiation and might be really serious, right?
And that doesn't mean it's a weakness. Like
no.
During negotiations, I ask sorry, so now I lost the power into negotiation, right? That's opposite, to be honest. I think it's if you're getting in the wrong track in negotiations because you misunderstand some nuances in some cultures, you say, okay, let me come back a little bit, try to fix this path and say, I'm sorry, let's bring back to the track and move from there, right?
Yeah, you can ask a pause. And think what's happening, observing the environment. I think the Japanese, as you were saying, they read the room, right? So they read the room. Sometimes they don't say anything. They just observe. They look to each other. They know what they are thinking. And you don't read the room. You don't know what's happening there. And you have to clarify, right? Sometimes you need some time to observe and ask a few questions to understand better. One thing that the Japanese do that I think it's absolutely interesting is that they don't usually say no. And then if you have like a deadline or you are waiting for a delivery, or if they're have like a specific purchase that you are expecting. They say, we're going to try, we are doing our best. They're going to say many things, but no, it's not going to come. And so you have to be aware about this. Otherwise, you will be thinking that the purchase is going to arrive in the exact day that you are expecting, right? So things that, and it's not absolutely a way to any kind of judgment about any kind of culture, because I think even the example we were saying about the Brazilians that arrive later in a meeting, but when they arrive, they are absolutely kind and respectful, and you feel super well, and they do great negotiations, are super innovators, and create a space for you to feel welcome. And this is also very admirable. So I think all the cultures have these differences. When you understand, you can navigate better.
Yeah.
One question to you regarding the culture things. Let's say one of our listeners now, it's the first time that they have to deal with a new supplier, let's say, like Chinese supplier. Let's just give an example. It will be the first time. Is there any guidance or strategies to prepare, not just for the deal itself, but for how we're going to make the deal, like putting some culture into the recipe or something like that?
Yeah.
Is there any tips to be prepared?
I think it's absolutely important to know who you are talking to. So if you are surprised and you have a conversation in a meeting, you just got there and you don't know their cultural background, or you see that there are different cultural backgrounds there. I think the active listening, really observing what's happening, asking questions, pause if you need, and try to really understand their interest, not their position first, is crucial to have a better negotiation. And when we are talking about position and interest, I would say that one thing is that you really want, and one thing is what you are saying, right? So it's what is behind that, what you really want, because probably can be something that we can work together and make something better. And then the conversation comes in a way to be open and put clarity on it and the expectations, and then you cannot lose the authenticity, for sure. Yeah.
One thing to add a little bit in the power vein that you were talking about, and I'm curious because you also teach negotiation as well. So when you're going into a new culture or a new environment, ideally you're going to have a fixer or a navigator who can really help you set up and interpret some of those signals that are intentionally being sent and unintentionally as well, right? So I think part of it is really doing your homework ahead of time, which includes getting somebody on board who has more insight into that situation. If it's a high stakes environment, and you're negotiating and it's a zero-sum game negotiation, it's not a win-win where you're trying to create something innovative or different, then you have to rely on those navigators to help you figure out how to get forward. But if you're in a win-win situation or you're building a longer-term relationship, then you can claim back your power if you sort of make a mistake and lose your power because of the mistake. But if you're in that win-win situation where you're really trying to build together, then you can do that pause and say, how do I repair the relationship with you or the person I'm talking to? And how do we get back on track? And how do we really now make this work? Can you talk a little bit about the two different I'm oversimplifying to say there's only two types of negotiation, but how would you adapt in those two different types of scenarios?
Yeah, there are negotiations that are absolutely sensitive, right? So you have to do the homework first and be with someone that is local, that understands these cultural nuances, that you cannot do a mistake there. Like that's the one time shot, that's like the chance you have. Yeah. The 15 minutes that you can to talk to that person. Yeah. So preparation for me is key.
Yes.
So if you go unprepared, so I see many entrepreneurs international entrepreneurs that come here and think, I want an investor, or I'm looking to apply for a business incubator international program, or I'm looking for a client. But they don't prepare. They think they can do the same thing they do in their country, and they don't know this cultural nuances. They think it's not so important, like the communication aspect of it. And then they lose that 15 minutes that they received, generously received. And I think it's okay. The person will talk to them again, but actually that doesn't happen.
But the door is going to be closed.
The door is going to be closed, right? So preparation for me is key in both situations. In high stake, but then you have to have your supporters, every kind of support you can have to navigate better, like you were saying, with your maps, with your advisors, with people that understand the cultural nuances, clear commitments before starting the meeting, and being assertive in a way. If you are in a group that you see that are different cultures, I would say be as direct and assertive as you can, in a respectful way, because maybe they are not going to read the room and you are going to lose something there, right? So don't ask a question like trying to say something you want but not saying it. This happens a lot now with cultures that sometimes, even in personal life, my partner is Canadian, and sometimes I want to invite him, for example, to go to the movies, and I say, would you like to see that movie? And he say, no. I say, wow. Actually, I was inviting him to go to the movie, not specifically that one, right? But it sounds absolutely rude when actually he doesn't like that movie, but I would love to go to the cinema with you or hang out. So it's the way we say. But if you are in an environment that is not a big decision, right? And you can better navigate and be more flexible and have a better understanding before you go to the negotiation, straight to the negotiation, I would highly recommend arrive early, do the homework, have a conversation before with people you trust. One thing that I always recommend to my clients, if you're doing, like, for example, a speech, or if you're doing a meeting with a larger group, I say, ask to talk to one or two people before to understand their needs. So they have like a previous meeting, understand what they need, and then when they go to the meeting, they already have some people that they trust, that they feel not as a stranger there. And I think that makes a big difference.
In Japan, they call it nemawashi, the pre-negotiation negotiations, and they're so useful. They're so helpful. I mean, there's different ways that you can set the tone and the stage and the goals.
Exactly.
So, and to suss people out and figure out, where do we already have alignment? And
and if you are prepared for that, when you go to the meeting, people are really going to pay attention to what you're saying, because you are respecting at least the minimum parts. So, this person seems very professional. And sometimes it's not something that you are intentionally thinking, but our body language, the tone of voice, the way we express ourselves, if we're close or if we are distant, if we kiss, if we give our hands, all these kind of small signs can put a person in a more comfortable zone or not.
How important is humor in all of that?
I think it's very, very delicate. That's something that we really have to be careful. Because some jokes are not welcome.
That's true.
And what about humor about making a mistake? Sorry.
No, I learned in a terrible way, believe me.
I think all of us have, if we're being honest. You're not alone on that one.
No, I would not recommend. At least I don't know the person well. And I think dealing with people from different countries, if you go to the meeting prepared, setting the stage, bringing the materials, bringing an agenda, right? So you are not coming to improvise in the conversation. In Canada, you will be well received because everybody understands if you don't have like a perfect English, if you have an accent, or if you have a different culture. But it will be not accepted if you are not being respectful in a meeting.
Yes.
So it's a big difference with one thing and the other, right?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, I will ask, like, unfortunately, we have to wrap it up, like, the episode again, but times just fly. And I will ask you some questions to give you quick tips about how to be prepared, because we were talking about preparations. And in just a few words, how can I be prepared for the meeting and as best as we can? Let's say it this way.
Study about the company you are talking to. What are their interests? What they are looking for? What kind of challenges they face that you can solve? Bring that to the table. Have a previous conversation so you are better prepared. And be open for open-ended questions. Ask, be curious, and active listening. Really understanding what they are saying and not only asking another question that you have on the list. Like, ask a question based on what you are listening to. Then you are really having a meaningful conversation.
Wonderful. Katarina, final thoughts?
Yeah, final thoughts. What I love about what you've said is really emphasizing the preparation and curiosity. Yeah, I think those are such keys to being successful in life, not just multicultural, not just cross-cultural. And everything that you were talking about is in context of working in different countries. And the reality is all of the advice you're giving is just good business advice, good life advice, right? So I think it's brilliant. And I really love this idea of preparation and curiosity. I think we need, all of us, of course myself too, need to do that a lot better. So it is, I think the more we pay attention to that, the more we can enter into healthy, happy, productive relationships.
Yeah, and I would say one thing that we didn't talk about, but I'm working in the innovation ecosystem, like with a lot of innovators, startups, and they often talk about pitching, right? The pitch. And sometimes people pitch at you. There is not conversation. There is a memorized topic that they are talking about. But, and I'm not saying that you don't have to know what you're going to approach about your business, but you really have to adapt and understand how you can touch a point that is going to make sense to the other person because you're having a conversation, right? So I would say that very important that it should be there, be present, and have a conversation where you are really listening to the other person in a network event,
that is
in
so
a business
powerful.
meeting, because even if you are a shy person, an introvert, you can ask a question. You can bring a topic, even if you're not going to tell much. But if you ask an interesting question, you are going to stand out.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think that's another mic drop again. We're getting a few of these now. This is great.
Awesome. I'm going to bring some mics so people can just throw there so to not like ruin the equipment. But that's true. Raquel, how can people find you on social medias, please?
I'm on LinkedIn, Raquel Boechat, and my company is Canada Starthub. I also work with training AI with partners, and I'm launching a project to help women to talk and learn to practice how to have a meaningful conversation and lead more in a networking space. So this is going to be soon. I can share with you later.
Fantastic.
And about you, Katarina, how can people find you?
People can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Katarina von Maydel.
Awesome. So if you want to follow our social medias, I'm going to drop here all the social medias that we have. Thank you for being here and listening to this episode. I hope you enjoy it as I learned a lot about culture. And keep in touch with us. That's Next Level Business Academy. Thank you so much.